What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I am BDLM, coming with my buddy J4Y, bringing you episode number 74 of our DoD on a Man podcast. What's going on, man?
What is up? Not much over here, actually. I've sort of recently finished up my Tusk legendary streak. And it's legendary, alright, because for me at least, 25 games, and it was actually not all 25 in a row, but let's not go there. But that will be discussed in a future episode. We are saving that one up, but just wanted to say, I feel like you should give me a little pat on the back for actually persevering and pulling through on that.
Yes, you did pretty good, except for the failure.
except for the small failure. Small.
Where you failed. And then, I mean, you did get some breaks because of Captain's Draft and Captain's Mode, but you know what? I'll take what I can get at this point. You know what? Good job.
Thanks.
Pat on the back, sort of. Thank you for being here. We've already sort of named the episode. We apologize in advance because Jay was not feeling it. He's dead and tired, and he had to fight tigers and bears to get here.
So many. Yeah.
But you know what? I'll give you a pat on the back for keeping consistent here on a delightful Tuesday night. And
Thank you.
So yeah, it's gonna be a great episode. We're talking about the finals from the D2L. Season 4, which just ended between LGD and Fnatic.
Spoiler.
I was going to just say that, actually. Believe it or not, guys, we might say who won. But there were actually some really neat things that came out of this. I mean, one, you have Fnatic, who is the squad that we had even talked about pretty recently, sort of coming, not out of nowhere, but just being really up front in their finishing in positions in recent tournaments, being runner-up to a lot of tournaments where there have been big name teams, and here they show up to D2L, 2 men down, not having Era. They also did not have my god, Jay.
Hani. Just kidding. Not. It's Hani.
Hani Era down, but picking up Demon and Aoi 2000 and trying to make the best of it, and actually doing pretty well. Obviously, making it all the way to the finals. There are also some just really neat, quirky things that happen throughout the finals, especially that we're going to be talking about. But I mean, what did you think about how this wound up, Jay? I mean, were you expecting to see Fnatic and LGD in the finals of this tournament?
I would say I would have expected it if it was a Fnatic full roster. I would have expected this. Given, though, that it was 3+2, and those two never even played on the same team before, I was a little skeptical. And the fact is, and I'm not trying to undervalue each role, but your mid and your hard carry being the ones missing, I feel like a lot is on their shoulders during a game, and you really need. Generally, like, it's so important to have your carry and your main, like your 5 or whoever's in the lane support to have a great synergy to go well together, and they were like missing those kind of bonds. So, you know, everyone talks about how Era and No Tail just get along so well, and just like they almost have an ESP going on because they just can read each other's thoughts and just like move like an orchestra or something. I don't know how orchestras move, but they apparently in a great way. Maybe how they play is a better way to compare it. But I was thoroughly impressed, and I have to say, as far as Alliance not being in the grand final, I would have predicted that, to be fair, because I've been on the not the hate bandwagon, but I've been on the they need to make some changes. And actually, funny story, apparently they're going to be.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of changes are in store for them. Their manager happened to tweet out that something was going to have to happen, but I'd have to imagine it would have to be like a training schedule thing because, you know, obviously I think all those players have great individual skill. They obviously have played well together in the past. They've been pretty successful. So, you know, I know a lot of these teams have sort of entered the patch and not had a whole lot of time to practice. Obviously, I mean, we've had just a lot of great Dota tournaments going on. We really haven't had a whole lot of time to just sit down and play some practice games, play some scrims. But I'm really curious to see what those changes are. But I mean, the neat thing that I found about this Fnatic hodgepodge lineup was just that their sort of go-to strategies either weren't there or weren't available to work, and that they sort of had to, on the fly, come up with a new draft and play with it and make the most that they could out of it. Obviously, if you don't have Hani, you're not going to have Invoker. And we saw No Tail and Aoi try to do the IO Tiny combo, and it may have been less than effective, making some of the sort of professional noob mistakes of that combination of preemptively popping your BKB so that IO can't tether to you and drag you into a fight. But the thing that I really did enjoy about seeing Fnatic in this way is that it was sort of like without Era and Hani there, you really got to see what is so great about Era, Trixie, and No Tail specifically, because there were games throughout this tournament where each one of them just shined, and there was, I wish I could remember the game off the top of my head, but one that Fnatic winds up losing, but you're just like, Trixie Nature's Prophet just like being everywhere, really trying to hold that game together for his team when most of the, I think, mentions that Trixie gets in games are like, oh, Trixie feeding. Who would have thought? So it was nice to get to see each of them sort of like in the spotlight a little bit throughout these games.
Yeah, they really did shine through. I mean, I've always been a No Tail fan. I mean, for his personality, first of all, he's so passionate and he's so knowledgeable. And he's such a diverse player. He can play pretty much any role very well, and I think that's why they put him eventually on that support/jungle role, is just because he can really mesh with other people well and get along with them. It just, unfortunately, for some of these games, didn't have enough Trixies up their sleeve. But
we had too much fun with the jokes last episode, and so
we're trying our own. Mobius was the king, though.
We
but
still need the writer. We still
we're still recruiting. Yeah, if anyone's looking for that coached game or something, but no, it actually impressed me that they still tried to pull off these combinations that, like, kind of referring back to what I was talking about with having those synergies. You know, the IO and Tiny is can be devastating put in the right hands, but you know, unfortunately, like you said, there was some miscommunications at times, and some were Aoi's fault, some were No Tail's fault. You know, it was kind of back and forth, but at the end of the day, they just seemed to have a lot of issues and struggled to topple them for one of those games. You know how they changed Dazzle's his ability, Shallow Grave, to make it work on Magic Immune people?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why can't they do that for IO's Tether? I feel like it should be in a similar boat.
Because IO's just too good as it is. Do you really need to buff IO? Do you have to make it easier? I mean, you know, you just don't pop BKB first and you're set. You just gotta get the tether going first.
I suppose.
But the other thing that I really liked about the Fnatic lineup, and, you know, we're focusing a lot on Fnatic, but I think just because it's like so crazy that they even made it that far. I mean, LGD put together a really good set of games throughout the set, and I actually really liked their draft, especially in the third game, which we'll talk about later. But just the way that their Fnatic's lineup seemed to go for a lot of these games, it was almost like exacerbating physical and magical damage split throughout. You look at the heroes like Shadow Fiend, the Luna, and putting that like on the back of Elder Titan, which they tried to get into their lineup, it seemed like as often as possible whenever he wasn't banned out, seemed to be a trademark of what they really tried to draft in these games. And it almost seemed to be, to some extent, at the sacrifice of control. Like, they almost always had flies, Crystal Maiden. They would get something out of some of these other heroes. I mean, you have Elder Titan who could stomp, but obviously that's not like super dependable. They didn't have any of these like point-and-click slows or point-and-click stuns to really help make the game a little bit easier for them to sort of put together and play out.
They didn't have a clockwork or anything. I mean, their initiation was generally more or less lackluster. I mean, sure, they had some decent, like when they'd run Demon on the Kunkka, or like you said, Titan at times can obviously set up some decent ones. But there's nothing. They didn't have anything sweeping like I said, like a clockwork, like a Nyx assassin to start the fight, like a Dragon Knight to just barrel down the lane and set up a stun from range and help your team go in there. Storm Spirit. You know, they didn't have these wonderful things. The only one they really did throughout the series was that Naga Siren ulti that they could have used. had they wanted to offensively. But more or less, they seem more to work better in the skirmish kind of setting. And they really shine there, and I think it makes sense. When you have two ringers, you're not really going to have the synergy, and you maybe need to more rely on each person's individual skill rather than on fighting as five as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with that. But how about we jump into these games? Game number 1. We have for Fnatic, Crystal Maiden, Naga Siren, Shadow Fiend, Timbersaw, Luna against LGD's Doom, Rubik, Dragon Knight, Visage, and Storm Spirit. And of course, in this game, LGD actually decided to put Storm Spirit into the safe lane, played by Rabbit, and sending Dragon Knight into that middle lane, Doom to the off lane. How did you like this setup? I mean, was there anything maybe about this draft or these picks in particular that maybe caught you off guard or that you were interested in?
The Storm Spirit, we see him coming back and forth on the scene. I feel like he's more popular in Eastern than Western at the moment, but obviously a very strong hero nonetheless. Dragon Knight, he's kind of like the building blocks of a team. He's like the foundation. You put him down, and you kind of stack every other hero on top of it and go from there. He fits. He's such a great hero that he fits in pretty much any lineup. We've talked about it before, but great pusher, great team fighter, great tank. He does it all, and he doesn't even really need that many items to do it so well. So I love that they build all 3 games lineups around, or not around Dragon Knight, but they involve it so that they have that cornerstone to kind of build everything else around. The Doom was an interesting pick. He's obviously come out a lot more this post patch with all the buffs he's been getting over time, but. When I look at, there's definitely some great targets to focus on that Doom. You put it on Timber, you put it on Shadow Fiend or Luna, so they can't really burst down or they can't really do much else. Really strong, but at the end of the day, Fnatic just, all in all, fought out better. They had late game. They had some great late game threats with the Timber, Shadow Fiend, and Luna. And Naga Siren late game actually starts doing some work, giving a few items and some levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think this draft is a kind of good example of that sort of split magical and physical that I was trying to talk about earlier. You have the magical and physical coming out from Shadow Fiend, great. You have Timber, who does a lot of magic damage, can do some pure. You have Luna that does the split. So you have so much magic damage that you go, oh, okay, well, BKB would be really nice. Then you have, oh, here's Naga Siren, so we have Net, we have something that goes through that. And then if you are spending all this early gold on your BKBs, then we still have the right click behind it on enough heroes that it'll work out. And I think this is something else too that you see a lot in the Fnatic games is they had multiple core heroes. There wasn't that sort of like 4 support or 4 team fight controllers with one carry to back that up so that you maybe have a really strong middle game to win off of. They really were like, okay, if you shut down one of our lanes, odds are we're going to get something out of the other 2. And they made that work pretty well for the most part. But the one thing that I really did like about what they ran specifically in this strategy was if you saw what Fly was doing in the jungle, he was actually taking in the dire woods closest to their base, that hard camp, he would use Frostbite on the big creep, kill it for farm, pull the little creeps out, and then stack it, and then do the same thing again. So he would focus down the big creeps and leave just the small ones behind, which left an opening for Demon to actually come in on Shadow Fiend and just clean him up really quick. And you really got to see that he was able to do really well. And part of his farm was, I think, a big part of why they're able to do so well in this game. Because when those BKBs came up and were real nice and flashy, just punched straight through them.
Yeah, no, I've always been a fan with Shadow Fiend. Personally, I love watching him get played there because usually you have the supports who will take the time to stack all those creeps for you. And that's seriously how he gets out of control. He'll start doing really well in the middle, get his stacks up, and then as soon as he gets to level 5 roughly, gets a few points into his raise, then he can just go into the jungle and just kill a triple stack with just a few spells. And, you put a point or 2 in the Crystal Maiden aura, really helps his whole team around. And that's why I think, Crystal Maiden's just become such a nice support hero over time. Especially with like you're saying, the Frostbite farming the neutrals can get experience that much better. But that aura, now that's been buffed and allowed her to be a better laning threat as well as being helpful for her team. I mean, it just seems like it's been a nice way for them to have that kind of control that you're saying they kind of lack with the rest of their team. You know, she's always reliable for a slow and at least some kind of immobilization. So, yeah, I love seeing him. He did a great job on the hero.
Yeah, it was nice too because Fly doesn't do the like super jungle farm, and I'm just gonna provide my aura sort of deal that I think you see sometimes out of Crystal Maidens. He really would
I
just
love to
went
do that.
one.
I'm not gonna lie.
I I've actually been doing it a lot lately too. I'm really I've always been a fan of the Crystal Maiden, and either way I'm happy playing her. But that is what I've been doing a lot lately myself. But it was nice to get to see this sort of resurgence in the okay 1 point in aura, and then I'm gonna go for Frostbite, and I'm gonna go for my slow because those spells individually are so strong that it's just really nice when you have those points and then that early damage, that extra control, it really provides a lot to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And this game one was kind of back and forth. It was a rather long game, and a lot of it, I think 20, 30 minutes, there wasn't actually a lot of kills. There's a lot of farming and a lot of different things happening. But at the end of the day, like I said, it got to that late game point where, Luna late game, probably one of the best heroes 6-slotted in the game. I mean, it's just so much stronger, and especially with the buff. It wasn't the biggest buff to Glaze, but when you're that farmed and you have that many items, that buff actually can start playing a role in doing just so much insane AoE damage. And like you said, not only just the physical with the Glaze mounting, but then her ulti and occasionally a beam to do a little mini stun and just extra bonus damage. I mean, she really does some significant. And then you add a Shadow Fiend minus armor aura on top of that. I mean, it's brutal. And, despite having a lot of mobility going around on that dire side and the Storm Spear going just straight on someone like a Doomed Shadow Fiend or someone else, it just wasn't enough to pull off the victory, and eventually it led to a win for Fnatic. But it was a weighted game series. So LGD did start with a 1-game advantage.
Yeah, and just to talk a little bit about like what LGD did in this game. I mean, Rabbit got really good farm on that Storm Spear. He really did keep up, do a good job of getting that early farm that he needed to sort of start snowballing. But it was like by the time he was able to start participating, it was like already too late. Fnatic just had too good of a start elsewhere on the board, and the Dragon Knight I feel like just started okay, but then Shadow Fiend just took off and then never really found himself on even terms with that Dragon Knight again. I mean, he just stayed ahead of him for the whole rest of that game. And I mean, the thing that I really do like about the LGD lineup is, again, sort of the control that they had through the Doom, through the Telekinesis, through the Dragon Tail Stun, Visage, and in Storm Spirit, they have a ton of control. But, we saw Zhao 8 throwing out some Dooms that were kind of questionable or not throwing them out sometimes. Doom got put on a Luna after she had dropped the ultimate on one occasion. So there was a fight, the 36-minute mark, where he didn't even use it. Or no, the 36-minute mark fight was where he does Doom the Luna, sorry, after the ultimate was popped. So it was just like the tools were available, but they might not have necessarily been used as effectively as they could have. So, I think unfortunately part of the reason why Fnatic were able to take that game.
Yeah, no, there definitely was some misplaying and some not able to capitalize, like you said, on advantages they should have maybe had. But they definitely built on that in the series to come. Do you want to just briefly touch on a couple things about bans really quick? If you don't mind. Unless that messes up your whole scheme here.
I'm going to be thrown so off. I'm going to start talking about League of Legends. I'm going to be like,
wow,
just terrible.
I apologize in advance then.
Blitzcrank,
right.
What?
That's weird. So, Blitz has a new team. Anyways, now we're off. No. So, just wanted to say a couple things here, because I noticed also another pattern in the series here, is that they gave DEC on LGD, they gave him Visage all 3 games. Instead, they decided to ban Venomancer all 3 games instead of Visage. So, do you agree with that choice?
That's hard. I mean, I can understand it, certainly. I think that heavy slow can be super brutal, especially when you're going up against heroes that sort of need the little bit of a gap close. I mean, obviously for this game one, you have Doom, who would need maybe a little bit of help getting in there. He can only sort of scorched earth and run. You have at least have the long range stun from Dragon Knight, and obviously Storm Spirit can just jump in. But between that and the push potential, I think is a viable ban here. I mean, it's kind of like which is the lesser of two evils for what you're trying to do. I mean, the birds did cause a lot of trouble, but they also did feed quite a bit. I believe in this game in particular. Um, so, I don't know. I think you could really go either way with it. Because really, I think you see in these games that there are opportunities where you go, oh yeah, well, this totally made sense. Like if you're feeding the birds, then it was obviously superior to ban out the Venomancer, but then of course those birds could be devastating. So it's kind of I don't know a balanced blade, and I think that's always a hard decision, especially now when both of these heroes are super viable and super prevalent.
Yeah, I just found that curious, seeing that that's kind of the difference they had there was the between the Visage and the Venomancer, and then LGD. No discretion or no discrepancies, I should say, on their bans going with the Enchantress IO all 3 games. Um, do they just hate No Tail's haircut, or what's going on here? Why so much hate on him?
I think it was definitely just the play, man. I mean, I guess you could hate the haircut too. That might be insult to injury, but we got to see so many of those games. Even when Ali was playing the Tiny and they weren't linking up to make a fantastic game in that combination, No Tail just had so many amazing saves on his IO, being able to pop the relocate and tether somebody at the last second and take him out. Um, really, he might be like the best IO player right now after seeing those games. I mean, it's really hard to argue with some of the performances that he was putting on. I mean, obviously, this is a team that likes to run the IO, but this is like some of those situations where you go, even without that sort of wombo combo or the IO +1, just IO and like what he's able to do and bring to the team. I thought it's a really strong case for that. The other thing, though, looking at LGD's bans, I think it's really interesting. It almost sort of reminded me of like when we were talking about the finals from the last international, where you sort of threw a lot of the meta stuff out the window, and it really was like respect bans and heroes that you just don't want to see the other team get because they're so good at them. And you see this in game 1. You have the Elder Titan, which was popular. Ali bringing out the Death Prophet, so that was a ban, and Demon's Kunkka, the other 3 bans. And you see that in game number 2 as well. You get to see the Shadow Fiend banned out. You get to see the Death Prophet banned out again. So, LGD did a really good job here and just really limiting the tools that Fnatic have. And obviously, this is still a little bit far off. But when you go to game 3, you have both the Shadow Fiend and the Kunkka banned out. So it's like, well, what are we going to put Demon on? I don't even know at this point.
Does he play any other heroes? Or well, we saw a Beastmaster earlier, which didn't go. He did okay as the hero, but the game itself, I believe actually that was the Tiny IO game, so we kind of know the result of that one. But yeah, no, he obviously is a formidable mid player, and he's despite being kind of on the outskirts of the pro scene as of late. He still showed that he's something to mess with, especially on the Shafi and Kunkka. He did some great combinations. Hitting a lot of X marks the spot plus torrent and ghost ships. I mean, that's Kuka's definitely a kind of a higher skill cap kind of hero. I mean, you've got to time that out. Of course, when you get the more levels in X marks the spot, it becomes a lot easier to manage. But even knowing the distance, knowing when to cast everything and do it properly. I mean, yeah, you could just go in and just cleave the whole world every now and then with the Divine Rapier, but there definitely is the aspects too that makes it a challenging hero, and yeah, he really pulled it off pretty well.
I mean, you can even see that too, because Steven was like putting points in an X marks spot. Some games going, the 1-1-3, prioritizing that just to make sure that not only could he hit the torrent, but he could also hit the boat. And that was something that, as we move into game 2, we'll just go over the picks really quick. You have from Fnatic, Crystal Maiden, Elder Titan, Kunkka, Bristle, and Alchemist versus LGD's Storm Spirit, Nyx, Nature's Prophet, Visage, and Dragon Knight. You really got to see where missing some of those Kunkka boats and torrents really hurts, and why it's so important to make sure that those go off without a hitch.
Yeah, if you do miss them, like you said, you're kind of relying a lot of it on for your CC, and you'd think like, hey, maybe with Titan we can go into some boats and we can do some different things, but they just didn't have either enough time to set up everything or just enough coordination to get it all done. And when you're dealing with such an annoying storm spirit who can just jump all over the frickin' map and harass you, it really was way too much for them to keep him locked down in one spot, and they kind of struggled with that. The Nature's Prophet 2 being a force they had to reckon with for the whole game, and then the Nyx Assassin. I mean, there was just so many annoying elements in this game for them.
Yeah, the other great thing too is Rabbit takes that Dragonite in the middle lane, and one of those boats in particular, he just does a nice little juke. He runs forward instead of back, where he was obviously expected to run, misses the boat completely. And there was, I think, a lot in this series sort of just focused in the middle, and that's something we're going to talk about later when you go to look at the wards. But it seemed to really be almost a regular part of the Fnatic strategy of, okay, we're going to get these lanes set up, and then once everything's sort of in place, we're going to wait a couple levels, and then we're going to go gank middle, and then we're going to do it again, and then we're going to do it again. And we're just going to sort of set up the snowball for Demon, because obviously he's playing these heroes that like the snowball. You have the Shadow Fiend and the Kunkka, both that really sort of add insult to injury once they get off to those really nice starts. So I think it was really well executed play out of LGD in this game that set them up for the victory. And then you also had a couple miscues. At the 5:30 mark, CM was like 5 or 10 mana short of being able to Frostbite, which would have pretty much guaranteed them a kill in the DK. 7:30 is when Rabbit dodges that boat. So they do these first two ganks, and they both fail and even give up kills in that. Right. So really hard to come back from.
Yeah, exactly. When it flops on your face and, like you said, give up kills, the swing is just huge because you've also wasted time on those heroes doing something else they could have been doing instead. So, really falls flat on their face there. And getting a Dragon Knight that much, credibility in the beginning and also that much strength, it's kind of hard for them to deal later on in the game. A BKB against this lineup was pretty dang effective, against the Titan, against the Crystal, the Alchemist stun. He was able to just kind of beef it up and go to town on these people.
Yeah, and that's something else just to mention, I guess, really quickly about this series and some of the other games I think Fnatic was playing as well through this tournament is you really don't get to see any aggressive tri-lanes. You really just see this interest in getting into the middle in the later part of the game, but using some of the early pressure towards the middle lane to sort of set you up for a more successful late game. And they look for this Alchemist. They just put him in the safe lane. They look to get farm on him, and he gets the armlet up actually, and really gets out of the farm lane and isn't able to do a whole lot, unfortunately. Almost sort of the same thing with Rabbit in the first game. He's able to sit there, he's able to get the farm up, but when he moves out, he's just not able to do enough to try and pull out a victory, and eventually, Fnatic just fall too far behind in this game.
Yeah, it definitely was a travesty of sorts, but led to a 2-1 advantage going into Game 3.
Yes, in Game 3, indeed, where the lineups were on Fnatic, the Crystal Maiden, the Doom, the Outworld Devourer, the Elder Titan, and the Death Prophet, against the Dragon Knight, the Disruptor, the Clockwork, Visage, and Spectre.
Can I just say how happy I am that there's no Wind Ranger, so you can't mess up the name and call her Windrunner right now?
I kind of wanted to call Death Prophet Crobolus.
I'm so glad you didn't, though. There's no Furion in here either. That's the thing.
I could have said Outworld Demolisher.
That would have been way off, but yeah, you could have done that, I suppose.
He used that for like a day. Like a whole day.
Very true.
But anyway, I mean, like I said, Jay, absolutely no surprises at all in these drafts. Every single one of these heroes, completely standard.
Absolutely standards. Across the board.
Every single hero.
Every single hero has been played.
Which would you say is the hero that you see so much it makes you sick, perhaps, of these heroes that we see all the time?
Probably Disruptor, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm just tired of him. I mean, when you see him this much, you just, you have trouble, God, I was trying to make a funny joke, like...
It's okay.
And then it failed. But yeah, no, getting to see Disruptor, everyone's, it's just amazing when he does like this, when he plays the way he needs to exactly be played. The glimpses, getting such amazing work done with those. This was like LGD at full strength. They were going gung ho this game, and they played it beautifully. This is where that orchestra moving thing totally happening right here. Getting not only the glimpses going well to set up into their other CCs, which they seem to always run a pretty heavy CC team, and it obviously favors them greatly when they can pull it off. But it just was the two notes I really had. The main notes I had were glimpse does work, and Yao is way too good on clockwork.
Oh, those are valid points. I think Yao did a fantastic job. There were, like mentioned earlier, quickly there were a lot of wards towards the middle lane, and you got to see him take advantage of that, getting a pick off on fly. Beautiful hook into the Roshan pit. This was a game where I think if you compare to game number 1, there were 3 uncontested Roshans for Fnatic.
Mm-hmm.
And in this game, you got to see a lot more contention. And it definitely played into favor of LGD. And the thing that I really liked in this game about LGD is that they learned from the other games that Fnatic had played, because they come out of the losers bracket finals having played against VC, who had run a disruptor, as well as a gyrocopter, and against the Crobless, actually, against the Death Prophet of Fnatic. And where they sort of fell short was when Fnatic sort of balled up and they looked to push down towers. They needed Gyrocopter to be there, and they actually wound up having like Doom off in the side lane, Chuck just hatching away at creeps and trying to get some farm, and they weren't ever able to really take advantage of having somebody else outside of the fight. But here in this LGD lineup, you see that sort of made the decision made much better for as far as a hero that can sort of fill that role of not participating but being able to be there when you need them, in the form of Spectre. I mean, you saw lots of times Spectre was just able to be off on his own, do his thing, get his farm up, get the phase boots, the drums, and the radiance up at a really decent pace, and then start moving around the map and tearing people up. And I was actually just really impressed by that pick in particular because, again, this is a hero we don't get to see that often, but man, it just made perfect sense against the Fnatic lineup.
Yeah, it was the early game Spectre too. That's what I really appreciate about it. They knew what they were up against. They knew they'd be against a Death Prophet who, as soon as hit 6, would start pushing down towers, and they were going to have an answer because, of course, she built the mech to after the Trank boost and just keep the push alive, keep the flow going for their team. They had strong late game with this lineup. Don't get me wrong. The minus armor auras, the Doom, the OD for late game damage, but anytime you're against a Spectre, you generally don't want to drag it on too late. So instead of going just this hard farm, not worrying about the world, hand a Midas Spectre or something, he like you said, goes phase drums, and then goes to the Radiance. And the only reason I feel like he really went Radiance is because they started getting such an advantage. They kept winning team fights. He was able to farm with sometimes not even having to be involved in the fights because the ganks were just so great from Yao and other players that he was allowed to just continue doing what he wanted to do. And eventually, after he got that Radiance, he was just so brutal in that game. The supports on their team just started getting annihilated. The OD, who went hand to Midas, by the way. Demon did go a greedy hand to Midas this game. And, you could put the argument out there. Well, first of all, I'm just curious. Why do you think he decided to run that item?
Well, I was going to say this. I feel like the lineup is... It's much more even as far as your late game potential. I mean, I still think that Fnatic probably have a bit of an advantage because not only do they have, 2.5 carry, so they also have the Elder Titan that's able to sort of amplify that damage output. Really, you have a Dragon Knight who, if he's able to get a decent start, he's going to be all right. And then you have a Spectre. And the way, again, that Fnatic was playing, they're not challenging the safe lane. They're pretty much going to say, okay, Spectre's going to have a great time. As far as the middle lane goes, you have an OD versus a DK. OD should do fine. Okay, I'll just go ahead and get my Midas. You saw the gank at the 10-minute mark where Demon has the ability that if he had gone 4-staff, like Merlinia pointed out actually in the cast, might have survived there. And another thing just to point out how Fnatic have been drafting this sort of split damage but maybe a low amount of control lineup. you see TPs come in immediately to help Demon. The first one is Elder Titan, who just sort of walks around, isn't able to do anything, and then eventually Fly shows up, but it's too late. And there's not enough that they're able to do to really save Demon and stop him from then, succumbing to the gank and falling behind and allowing DK to get that space.
Yeah, that's an issue. One of the probably only issues with Elder Titan is that early game has a support. He doesn't really bring a lot to the table. I mean, he's got the burst damage, I suppose, but every support seems to have some kind of that on their kit. And then I'm sure minus armor and resistance is decent, but it's not at the same time any crowd control. And how often do you see them putting a point in that stomp early? It doesn't happen that often. So until he really gets his ultimate or some higher levels, he's really not. His TPs are only so helpful. He's really just a couple auto attacks and maybe some extra bonus damage. But really, like I said, any support can provide that. So you compare that to a Disruptor or Visage that's going to come in and help. They've got so much at their fingertips to use. They've got a great slower burst. They've got Disruptor keeping them in place or bringing them back with Glimpse. I mean, just so much more out of that early support coming from the LG lineup that it almost seemed like Fnatic here was trying to kind of have something for every part of the game, but not excel at one time period of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think their mid to late game is pretty strong between the OD, the Elder Titan, and then Death Prophet, especially with the way that Ali was building Death Prophet, which, don't worry, we're going to talk about that one, because I thought that was pretty interesting the way he decides to take her. But I feel like it's almost sort of obvious that you need to have an earlier mid-game presence to help you roll into the late game. Obviously, Spectre is going to be a threat super late, but I don't think you... Or I guess I just don't understand why they didn't maybe go for more choices, like that quick force staff to give them something to help in these team fights. Because, when you're talking about the Elder Titan, he's not giving crowd control. But, if you run an Elder Titan in a CM and you're able to gank, you get the small fights, like you mentioned earlier in the episode, the really nice little skirmishes, then that makes a lot of sense. You got plenty of crowd control, you can put out the damage. But as soon as you get all five of these heroes, which have, well, four of the heroes have great crowd control, and of course you have the slow coming out from Spectre in the dagger, how are you supposed to fight that when you're just sort of banking on getting to the late game?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Crystal Main's their only real early game kind of foothold for nice team fight control or direction. But aside from that, like I said, because of kind of almost greedy lineup they did, with the Titan and the OD, who, each of them have some kind of way to, I guess, do something in a fight direction-wise, but yet it's nothing on the lines of a Clock or a Disruptor or Visage. So, and then, of course, like we said, Dragon Knight on top of that is just this powerful mid-game, kind of almost can, like, stand up with Death Prophet and just be a similar wrecking force in that fight. Someone that you is doing a lot of damage and providing a lot of that AoE, and you want to focus him down, but it's usually troublesome, so it's kind of almost similar in that regard. And then the Spectre vs. OD, the OD was just too squishy, and just got sometimes bursted down within a matter of seconds, and, it just really turned the whole fight around at that point.
This might be a great time to sort of segue into how Ali built the Death Prophet when he played her in these tournaments. Winds up going for the mech, Tranquil Boots, Yule Scepter, and then Scotty. And I find it really strange to go this build. I thought it was neat, and I kind of liked having the mech on Death Prophet, but the hero doesn't have that much mana to throw around. And I almost wonder if in this game in particular it might have been better to say, hey, let Demon get mech, so we have the survivability on him, and then we can just go for a different item on Death Prophet. Could just go the Yules faster or go the Atos faster, which you went in another game. You have that super squishy hero on the OD, like you're pointing out, and then you have Death Prophet, who really needs the Yules to be completed to be able to support the mana pool of having the mech pop cost on top of throwing out the silence, throwing out Crypt Swarms, and popping Exorcism. I mean, what were your thoughts on the build in this game and other games?
Yeah, I mean that's generally as it goes. The trank boots on Death Prophet. I mean, I kind of can get it if you're against someone that's harassing you a whole lot, and obviously it wasn't played middle. If it's played middle, you're going to get that bottle, so you're going to have plenty of regen throughout the laning phase, hopefully. So I guess I could see that the move speed. You just obviously taking something that she's good at and making it that much better, due to the fact that she already has a lot with the witchcraft going on, but. Still, she was kind of lackluster, like you said, from the mana because these first couple items she builds are just more or less either not helping her mana pool or, in fact, using it like the mech. So, while she's great in small doses, she didn't have sustainability throughout the game. And I've always questioned something like a Bloodstone on her because I see it get built a lot of times, and as far as mana regen, it ends up being overkill later in the game because as soon as you get higher levels, you're going to have the mana pool sustain your push. But I think a lot of times it's also, obviously, Bloodstone's not only for mana regeneration, it's also for the death timer as well as helping your team when you fall and the stats. But, in this particular case, I could have seen maybe something more crowd control related possibly or something. I don't know. I just felt like it was maybe too much or I should probably more put it, not enough of the sustainability early that really kind of maybe stopped their pushes short or made it so he couldn't do enough for his team at that point.
I mean, I would have taken like a drums. I mean, maybe not the ideal, but if you have OD that could build the mech and maybe get some more of that sustainability to stay alive, in some of these situations where it's taken down too fast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's again, it's going to increase your speed, like you're saying, and sort of stacking on the idea of the witchcraft. You're going to get the Yules anyway, so you're just going to be flying around, LOL, as it goes. So I don't know. I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, and Aoi did actually mention that he hadn't really played Death Prophet before this tournament. Mm-hmm. And I think even another interesting quote to sort of put on the back of that is Fly and No Tail, I believe, had mentioned that they wouldn't have picked some of these heroes, obviously, if it weren't for Demon and Aoi being there. So I'm kind of curious to see if any of these heroes wind up persisting in the Fnatic hero pool as they move into other tournaments.
Yeah, assuming that the players who come back actually are more comfortable with that. Like you said, with Hani out, there was no Invoker going on this tournament, but with him back, I'm sure he'd much prefer having that for his middle over a Kunko or, Shadow Fiend or someone else. But it was cool. It was really nice, and it was, I guess, also allowing these players like Demon and Aoi to play heroes they were comfortable with, and you obviously have to kind of play into that when you're at a disadvantage like this.
The thing that I also really liked about this game in particular was, I guess, going back to Disruptor. We saw, again, in the Vichy Game 3 versus Fnatic, like, just beautiful, beautiful kinetic field storm combinations. 3-4-man storms. And you really didn't see that in this game, but you saw a lot of really nice glimpses back to be able to set up other heroes, like Clockwork, to hold people in place. In that 10-minute gank on a Demon, you had the cogs go up, and then immediately you had the kinetic fields go up, so there was no hope of force staffing out, and there was extra layer control there. So I really just liked that this hero really was a lot about the glimpses. It was about once we get Fnatic on their back foot, we can just pull people back in, and you saw a lot of kills generated that way, actually. And it's neat seeing a lot of these heroes in the finals of Season 4 of the D2L, these two big name teams pulling out some really interesting picks, just sort of piggybacking on some of the stuff that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks about how teams can really just pick niche strategies and really do beautiful things with them.
Absolutely. What do you think about Merlin? Do you think he hated AC? Do you think that's why he just ignored him when he talked sometimes?
Wow.
No, did you hear about the drama? There was a little drama. No, it was drama induced by Redditors, so it wasn't real drama. But it was this guy basically, like, people start up threads like, oh, well, he's repeating things that AC said, but he must not be listening. He must not be even caring what he's saying. And then people are like, when you cast for like 8 or 10 hours in a row, you might start not concentrating fully on everything your co-casters say. I mean, hell, how many episodes have we done? We only do an hour at the most. How many episodes have we done where like I find myself like repeating something you just said about 10 seconds ago? Like, this stuff happens. It's not really a big deal.
It's actually amazing that it goes as well as it does for us because I almost never listen to what you say.
Almost never.
And but no, when we were casting, actually, way back in the day, we had that problem. But it happens. I mean, I think
Right.
they did a pretty good job overall. I really like having Merlini there. He's a good insight caster. Does a really good job. Icy is he has that very showman quality to him. So as soon as Dota gets as big as the NFL, I'm sure he'll be the next Sunday afternoon commentator. That beautiful voice of his. But I mean, overall, I was pretty happy with how the tournament turned out. I mean, LGD. I guess we didn't really say they take the win.
Oh, they won.
Nah, they get their second place again. But there was like a lot of pauses and a lot of issues there, which was pretty frustrating. And it was late at night. I was ruined for that week
yeah.
at work. The following mornings. But the games overall, I think were a lot of fun to watch, and I definitely, thank you HyperX for putting the money behind the tournament because it definitely yielded some fun
And
things.
the website d2l.gg, actually, it's a really. I feel like if they spent less time and money on the website and more on the actual LAN event, maybe it wouldn't have been a little more smoother. But still, it's actually a really pretty site, and it's got all the playoff brackets. You can go there, check out the different teams, the bands, the picks. You can even watch the videos, apparently, if you just click the link. And so you can go to that site if you haven't had time to watch these games yet. There's some good things to go in there, and I'd definitely suggest you can even skip around if you like, but it's definitely got a good taste for it, and it was a really nice tournament to kind of ease back into with, I think.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit. I just want to get your thoughts on a couple things here.
Okay.
Mine, sir. First of all, something I was mentioning earlier that I really wanted to talk about, the middle warding, because I feel like looking at all these games, there were great plays and neat heroes and stuff like that, but I was really starting to look for things that you can really take out of these and bring to your own games, and one of those things was just how many wards were placed in middle, and like I said earlier, there was a lot of emphasis, especially by Fnatic, to try and get early mid ganks, and when that was effective, obviously, that really helped them get off to a great start, helped them snowball in the mid and late game. But what are your musings, your monologue notes on warding towards middle? Because I think when you look at sort of our level of play or lower, you see a lot of people that would just like default to putting wards on the rune spawns, a third of the way up the river, on top or bottom.
The issue with our level, I feel like, is not necessarily putting wards there, but it's not buying enough wards in general. Like, these pro players almost always, when their wards are off cooldown, they're purchasing them, and they're placing them just all over in places that can benefit a specific lane they want to possibly dominate, or something like that. And I think that's where a big discrepancy comes in, because in the pub level, as supports, no one wants to play that 5. No one wants to get no items all game and sacrifice for the team, because you don't have that kind of synergy, that camaraderie. You want to kind of build some boots, you want to get some arcade boots maybe or something. So I feel like a big issue is just the lack, but also positioning. You're right. There is the default issue, which a lot of people who have not either tested the limits of their wards and where they can place them, or are just really not that knowledgeable, and or maybe don't play support very often, will just put them in those 3 or 4 spots I could point on a map if I have one right in front of me, that everyone should know about right now. Like you said, the ward, the rune spawns, and then of course the high cliffs in the corners by the tier 2 in both bottom and top. Obviously the most popular spots, but the middle lane, and I think this really shined in the LGD versus Fnatic, was a lot of their games focused on middle lane. It was just about control and ganks, and either side really wanted to try to dominate the other in some kind of fashion. I think Fnatic did so many ganks, like we said, some failed, some didn't. And they had the heroes that could set up well, like an OD or a Kunkka, that could really put someone in position to get killed by two of their teammates. And when you get that kind of vision all over the middle, not just by the rune, but also by the tower, that's where you really get a good sense. Not only is a gank coming on me, but where is he so I can land my abilities to set one up on him.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously huge because you have the divot in the ground going into the river. Just having that ward, like even just at the very top of the ramp on the other side, lets you know who's TPing in, lets you keep vision so you can cast your spells when you're moving in for the gank. And I think especially when you looked at game 3, you had two really great opportunities, one on each side, to see why these mid wards are so important. Doom actually gets dropped on Clockwork, who's sort of he's out camping in the trees, just to the northwest of the middle tier 1 tower for Dire, looking to try and get a hook on somebody behind the tower, and overwalks Doom, drops Doom, LOL, don't get to jump in on the fight. Clockwork sort of thwarts the whole plan there. And then you have the LGD ward that just lets Clockwork just zoom in, snipe, fly. Right, no big deal, no questions asked, no contest. So, really those two instances in particular, and then again, just when you're playing these games, especially with heroes like this, like when you have OD, when you have Kunkka, when you have Shadow Fiend, or even the DK who needs something to sort of get off the ground, how important those mid wards can be and how important it can be to put early pressure on those heroes.
I'm in agreement.
Other thing too that I thought was really cool, I believe it was in game number 3, test my memory here, and just how effective it can be to carry smoke too. I mean, that's obviously something I feel like, again, at our level or lower, is something that you maybe don't think a lot about or don't have the idea of how to use it. Roshan attempt actually by Fnatic. They happen to see two of LGD's players in the top lane. We've got plenty of time to do it. They pop a casual smoke that Disruptor was holding, I believe, and they're able to get into the fight. And really, I think a part of the game that really just the momentum heavily shifts in LGD's favor, being able to take team fight off of that. And, again, just on putting pressure on that middle lane, smoke being super valuable and something I think you see picked up a lot in these games to try and put on that pressure. I think it's neat just to see it not only as that ganking tool, but also just to be able to move around the map quickly toward, like, getting towards Roshan.
Yeah, the move speed definitely something that shouldn't be too underrated. It obviously helps out a lot, especially in the earlier parts of the game where the supports maybe are a little slower than most heroes and need that extra boost to get to those lanes faster. That fight you described, that really was one that just, like you said, changed it completely. Clockwork, and this was, of course, Yao doing his ham salad work, going in, hooking in, and as soon as he got there, he did steal the Aegis, and like simultaneously, Demon just getting annihilated by a soul rip from the Visage. I mean, it was just like everything gone wrong in about 2 seconds flat. They did pick up the kill on it, but it was definitely not worth it by any stretch of the imagination. They ended up pushing after that as well, and that really was a big momentum shift. So smokes are obviously something that I'd say is challenging. It's obviously cheap. 100 gold is really easy to afford for anyone in the game, but getting the most use out of it, now that's something that takes someone with a little bit of knowledge to get going there.
Yeah, but it's nice too. I mean, I think even it's just thinking about it as being able to avoid wards, being able to avoid vision. Obviously, again, people have these sort of trademark places to put wards at our level, so I think even more reason to even try and get that. I mean, you could sort of go I don't know, oh, they're probably not going to put wards up this game, so I really don't need to get smoke. I mean, I think it's a great thing to practice too, because obviously the smoke isn't going to break when the hero would normally be able to see you, so you have that little bit of an extra advantage there. And so just being able to practice that, learning the distance it breaks, I think, that's obviously maybe an underused item at our skill level, and something that everybody out there should definitely.
Well, I think, and ever since, after the smoke buff, I think it should be starting to get used more in general, just for the fact that you can't see them even with sentries. I mean, people are just now really invisible to the naked eye. Yeah, I guess that works. But Yeah, I definitely would appreciate it more in our scene, but I'm not going to have high expectations over here. I don't
Well,
buy it, so I don't expect other people to.
bad,
I
bad, bad,
know,
bad.
I know.
Well, I think we did a good job here, my friends.
Yeah.
And the best part is that we have another major tournament to talk about next week because Star Ladder Season 8 ends. And obviously, we've been pulling some of our content from that, and all those games have been really rewarding, really fun to watch. So make sure you guys are checking it out this week. I know I've been trying to tweet a lot more about some of the games I've been watching and stuff. So feel free to join me in the conversation on the Twitter. You can find Dodo on Demand at facebook.com/Dodo on Demand, youtube.com/Dodo on Demand, on Stitcher, and on iTunes.
Yeah.
Got anything else, my friends?
That will do it for me.
All right, well, until we see you guys next week, enjoy playing Dota, enjoy watching Dota. See you then.